I do tap dance, but I'm not in the right shoes today. So, without further ado, as cybersecurity professionals, we all understand the impact and toll of an attack on a company. But what if that attack is on an individual instead of a company? Next on stage, we are honored to have Kimberly Black. Kimberly's story helps illustrate resilience, inspiration, and action. Please welcome a Fireside moderator, Ali and Kimberly Black.
You've been awake for a while now. You've got me feeling like a child now. 'Cause every time I see your bubbly face, I get the tingles in a silly place. Thoughts in my toes make me crinkle my nose. Wherever it goes, I always know.
Y'all good? All right.
Testing.
You're good to go? All right. So Kimberly, it was September 2018. We met for the first time in one of my labs.
Yes.
We did a quick social media story with each other. Those are memories, almost like diaries and notebooks that we carry with ourselves.
Yeah.
There's no healing if there are no memories, and memories are extremely important.
Yeah.
So I thank you for your courage, your strength, to share with us a memory of an event that I think everybody in this room needs to hear about. 2020, summertime, you were going on a walk, something that we take for granted. With all the strength in you, talk to the audience about what happened on that day.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to share. So I'm sure you all remember the summer of 2020. I'm going to reluctantly take you back there when everyone was, looking for cool mask ideas, driving by people's houses for birthdays, and lining up at the grocery store. So one thing I did at that time was go for walks, which all of us probably did in the summer of 2020. And at that time, I was just finishing my master's thesis. I had just submitted it, and I was preparing to defend it. So I would go for walks all the time to disconnect from technology, right? We all probably did that. Normally, my husband and I would walk together, especially during the pandemic, but he was just finishing up some teaching, so I stuck my head in his office door and I said, look, I'm just gonna, shake the dust off and go for a walk. I'll be back soon. So I went for a walk, our same route, 4 or 5 kilometers. I took the same route we always walked, and what I didn't realize at the time was that I was being followed. And I was being followed for the majority of my walk. And why didn't I sense this person? Well, I would later learn he was about 150 feet behind me, until we approached a patch of trees by the side of a busy road, which I never paid attention to before. But as we approached that patch of trees, he would knock me unconscious, drag me into that patch of trees by a creek bed where I would be raped and viciously beaten. I was left for dead overnight. I was missing for 14 hours. And I don't know if you want me to talk about my search. So I was looked for by the K-9 unit, helicopter, patrol car, on foot. And it wasn't until the following morning when a new crew of police officers that had just started their shift were given my picture and a map of my walking routes, and were told to canvass the neighborhood looking for me. And as luck would have it, 2 young police officers made the decision to venture down into that creek bed, and a young officer, only 24 years old at the time, only 2 years on the force, spotted my arm sticking up out of the creek bed. So they found me. I had a punctured lung, several fractured ribs, a cracked skull, and as what I've been told, it was not a pretty sight. So I was found, taken to the Oshawa airport, where Orange was waiting to fly me, but at that time I had my first cardiac arrest, so they ended up taking me to the hospital. In total, I ended up having 4 cardiac arrests, before I was able to be flown to St. Mike's Hospital, where I was placed in a coma for a week to, hopefully bring my body back to a state where they could do reconstructive jaw surgery, because my jaw was broken in 2 places and shattered. That's what I was told. So it was not a pretty sight, but here I am today. So.
They say growing is painful, but growing to this point, to this position that you've come to right now, has been a journey. And, the simple thing like going for a walk, we take it for granted. And as human beings, we have this never-ending ability to almost take lots of things for granted. When this situation happened, one of the most important things that happened was the community mobilized around you. And if I recall correctly, the video camera footage and all of that, the tech around you, came to the fore and the community came together. Can you tell us a little bit about what was that, what happened in that moment, and what transpired from there to actually catch the individual who committed this crime?
Yeah, well, I would later discover, because I was basically unconscious for about 3 weeks, but as information was relayed to me after, it turns out that the camera footage on the homes along my route were instrumental in catching the attacker. And when I discovered that, it causes me to really promote getting cameras on your homes, but not only that, registering them with the police, because the police had to go from door to door. So I think there was 7 videos from different homes that kind of have him following me the entire time. So they knew who it was, but it did take them a little bit of time to arrest, just because of, I have to be careful what I say because the trial is in November. But that camera footage, if it wasn't for that camera footage, I'm not so sure he would have been caught.
And I want to just extend from there, because not only was it the camera footage, it was other details that came along with that, people sharing some things that they may have seen, etc., that led to the capture. But then, when you were in the hospital, there was, I say this all the time, that to some people, you might be one person, or to the world, you might be one person, but to that one person, you are their entire world. There was somebody that stood by your side this whole time that brought you to this point. Can you tell us a little bit about that person?
Without crying, probably not, but I will try. My husband is what I refer to now as my hero and my rock. And what's interesting about my husband, his name's Rob Tardik, he's a performing artist and musician, is that for him, music was therapy. It always has been, right? If you're feeling down, you go play on the guitar, So during the time that I was unconscious in the coma, he used music therapy with me. He didn't realize he was using music therapy, but he would play songs that he had written on his phone and through the ICU door, and then once he got his COVID test passed, he would sit next to me and he'd play me music. He'd also play me voicemails that people left, and he'd read me messages and text messages, but mostly music. And what I discovered later, after doing some research, is the incredible impact that music has on a brain, especially when you're in a coma, what it does for coma patients. So to this day now, I credit him for bringing my brain back, because when I was first brought to the hospital, the doctor said I had global brain damage and that he needed to be prepared to make a decision. After the week coma, before they did the reconstructive jaw surgery, if I still had global brain damage, he'd have to make a decision. When they came back after the week, I had no brain damage. It was the oddest thing, and I credit it to the music therapy that I got.
And ironically, Rob right now is teaching a music lesson.
He is.
And again, we don't really understand how much of an impact we can have. And remember, I told you this is, with Rob, you only live once, but if you live it well, it's more than enough. And hats off to Rob for everything that he did and continues to do. Now, as we go down, as you know, we're speaking to a crowd of folks who are in the world of security. And with more intelligence coming forward, the camera footages, et cetera, there was a little bit of an intelligence gathering that started to happen, which you were later informed about. How did that lead to the individual getting caught, and what's happened since?
Well, I think it was really, feet on the road, basically, like the police officers having to go house to house, basically canvassing the neighborhoods. And then, I was never on that side of things before. I didn't really understand the extent of the work that our police officers do, that are all of our first responders. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. But the thing is, when you're in my shoes, if any of you have ever been in that circumstance, you know that you're not allowed to know anything. So even right now, there's a lot that I simply don't know, and I'll be able to know once it goes to court and everything. But right now, I think they try to protect you by not telling you those things. But I know a lot of people shared information about the events of that evening, which led up to the arrest. That's so, the society, our neighborhood community was protected very quickly with the first responders.
Kimberly, when we were backstage and we were having this discussion, and in full transparency, the world of security, cybersecurity specifically, you're fairly new to it and nascent to it, although always been an enthusiast in some shape or fashion. We started talking about trust.
Yes.
And we had this conversation about this term that you've heard quite a bit, zero trust, right?
Yeah.
From a trust perspective, this entire experience, what did that do to your routine of going back to work? You're walking again. You've even started your own movement. How did you rebuild that trust again?
Well, I think that's a really valuable point that you're bringing up. Like, when I went for the walk, I went for a walk alone. A lot of us women do, right? And we have every right to feel comfortable doing that. In my neighborhood, I felt safe. I trusted the surroundings. I didn't worry. That's why I didn't take my phone. I just thought, I'll be fine. I'll be back in an hour. But what it's done to me now, and to be perfectly honest, I continue to walk the same route that I walked, and my husband and I have even ventured down into that creek area. And part of it is because I want to take my power back. I want to take the power back, not give it away now. So what I would say to all the women out there is, don't stop going for walks. Don't live in fear. Just look out for each other. And that's why things like the camera, yeah, sure, it'll protect your house and your valuables, but it could protect someone that you don't even know that it's protecting them, just like it protected me. I know when I was in the hospital unconscious, the Durham Regional Police hosted a community walk, and everyone got together and walked the same route that I walked, basically just a solidarity walk. And a lot of women started looking out for one another more and going in partners, like walking in partners. And maybe that's subsided a bit now, but I think the message is there, right? Like, just look out for each other. And if you notice something going on, just maybe pay attention. Is someone following someone? Does someone look like they're in distress? Just be aware, be conscious of these things. I don't feel fear. I don't not go for walks. I don't know, I don't want to live in fear that way. So I wouldn't suggest that. Just be protective. Just watch out for each other.
I'm just going to peer a little bit more into your recovery and then start going down this path of resiliency that you've taken, because there's a lot of messages for folks in security. Yeah. Especially all of us do deal with breaches. We deal with circumstances, and you have to recover from it. You've gone down this very interesting path where it's been a lot of destruction and pain, but you've constructed something new. And you've gone down this path where you've started your own show, and more importantly, you've also focused a lot on being in front of the camera, speaking about things, being very open about what has happened. Can you tell us a little bit about where did this come from? Because in most cases, silence is an easier veil to hide behind than to come out and share the wounds.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I have a different speaking I want to say gigs, because that's what you call them, opportunities, women will approach me and say, you know, thank you for sharing, such and such happened to me, and I just don't feel comfortable sharing, which is totally understandable. But before the attack, I was very much public facing. Like,
Yeah.
I created a lot of videos. That's one of the things. Ali and I created a video together.
Yeah.
I was a college prof. I was on the roster of a talent agency in Toronto, so I did TV commercials. I was very much on camera, and so I had to make a choice. I thought, okay, there's all these changes to my face. There was a lot of damage. You might not look at me now and say there's a lot of damage to my face. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to hide and say, oh, don't look at me now? Or am I just going to be, listen, this happened. Let's just get on with it. Let's move on with it and continue to post videos. And so we, one of the stories in the hospital when my husband first brought me, well, when I was first brought to the hospital, what they do is they bombard you with questions. What is your wife allergic to? What is medications is she on? What's her blood type? And this is one question I would ask all of you. Do you know your blood type? Do you know the blood type of your spouse, of your kids? You know, he didn't know, and he felt so bad. He thought, oh my God, she needs blood transfusions, and now she's gonna die because I don't know. Anyways, of course he was upset, but the nurse said, not to worry, we'll find out. Later that evening, she came back to him and she said, I just want you to know that your wife's blood type is B positive. And he broke down crying. And he said, of course it's B positive, but it encouraged him to be positive. And now a lot of the videos we create is hashtag Be Positive, kind of promoting a Be Positive message. So
Works really well. You know, Kimberly, speaking of videos, the first video we did was in 2018. I think I did a good job pretending to know about AI.
yes, you
I think I did
did.
pretty well. I remember that video very well. It still is on YouTube, and,
Yes,
and I
it
do
is.
reminisce quite a bit about that. Kimberly, going down this path, this road to recovery, you've been a professor at multiple institutions, and you're back on the teaching circuit as well, and you have a lot to offer. And I know we have a lot of academic folks here from the crisis management, crisis communication piece. You have a lot to offer in this space. And one thing that I noticed you started to do with your students, especially the international cohorts that you see, is you started to engage a little bit differently. And you started to help them gain a voice in a space where they don't necessarily get heard. Why has that been very important to your journey? Why teaching specifically?
Well, since I've been back to teaching after the attack, the first bit of teaching there was a lot of tearful moments, but then this last session, I was teaching at Centennial College, and I would say about 90% of my students were international students. And these are all extremely dynamic, professionally trained, educated students who really could have taught the class, you know, instead of me, and I often said that to them. And what I found was that sometimes they just needed some encouragement to use their voice and to help them understand that they have value and they're not less than, they're equal to. Anytime they go out in for a job interview, for instance, you are equal to the person that's interviewing you, and you are interviewing them too. So it's an equality thing, right? Whereas a lot maybe don't have that confidence, but having the opportunity to say rah, 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 you know, instill confidence in them, that makes me feel good and hopefully helps them too.
Extending from that, and perhaps keeping you in the teaching persona just a bit, we have a lot of leaders in the room from multiple organizations, public, private sector, a variety of institutions. And the reality is, as I was mentioning to you in preparing for this talk, that a lot of security leaders right now are dealing with the reality of either they know that they've been hacked or they simply don't know it, and it's a reality. You have to deal with incidents and you have to respond to it. And you have to take your team through that journey. You've built a team around you. You know, you have students that support you. You have your family as well. What are a couple of messages that you can give to security leaders about how to bring your team together in moments of such crisis, even when for a period of time you weren't accessible at all, but yet there was something about you that drove them to be positive and keep moving? What message could you give leaders out there?
Well, one of the things that I've discovered, because since this has happened, I've done a lot of research on resilience, because to be quite honest, I was often like, why am I okay? Like, why would some people maybe kind of go into depression, but I'm not? Like, what's the difference? I don't know. So I started doing research, and a lot of the research talks about three things that helps with resiliency, and that's experiences of joy, contentment, and interest. So experience joy. Take opportunities to have fun, to play, to laugh. Contentment. Enjoy being spoiled by someone who loves you, or enjoy going for walks or meditating, doing things that just make you feel at peace. And then interest was the other thing. Learn new things, explore your curiosity. Those three things are thought to give you strong resilience and foundation, so that if you are faced with a trauma, you have more resources to use to draw on, right? So what was interesting was I didn't know that, and I thought, okay, well, how does that relate to my experience? So one of the things I did for joy is I taught and danced salsa for years. I used to teach it at my home studio and do it in the community, and just because it was fun, right? And then
you convinced me to do it, and it didn't go very well.
I did. I did a PD session at Durham College and had all the profs. It was quite fun, yes, fun for all of us. And then contentment, when you're being spoiled by your partner, by someone that loves you, going for walks. That's something my husband and I do. And then I was doing my master's degree, so I was exploring interests that way. So what I feel happened was a lot of these things I was doing just because made me strong or something, so that when this terrible trauma happened, I was okay. That's the only reasoning I can come up with now. So to the leaders, with your teams, look for opportunities for your team to experience joy, have fun, go to a comedy club together, laugh, do things that are enjoyable. Give people the opportunity to have meditation, to go for walks, to do things that make them feel at peace, and then to help them learn something new, and it could be even to play the guitar. Anything that you do just because you're interested in it. Those kinds of things are healthy distractions and will build up your resiliency muscles, they call it.
Thank you for that. Champions are champions because of setbacks, like we spoke about, right?
Yeah.
And the way you've championed through all of this, there's a lot of lessons for all of us here. This journey, as you mentioned when we were sitting at the back, that you're a work in progress and forever will be. And what's next on this journey? Where else are you and Rob planning to go? And what are you planning to do with your teaching and your corporate journey as well? What does that look like for you now?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, my husband and I created a show called Take Your Power Back. It showcased at Flato Markham Theatre back in June, and then at a Ajax location in February. And it is storytelling, live music, and dance. And we kind of tell the story of resilience and how the community came together to support us. It's really a feel-good show. So we're working on that, and opportunities to do music therapy, kind of storytelling to music as a couple. I'm writing a book right now called Take Your Power Back, and it's basically a love letter to my husband for all that he did for me, and how the music that he created as a result of that is just so impactful and meaningful. And I start doctoral studies in September. What am I thinking? Education. So I'll be weaving that into the resiliency thing too.
Yeah, I'm at the dissertation phase myself right now.
I'm sorry.
And it's it's been a journey and a half. But Kimberly, there's so much that we could dive into, and I know it's getting late in the night. I think at this point, I just want to come to one last question, and this was something we debated on: should we discuss this or not? And I think we should. Okay. I think we're at that moment where we really should. You mentioned something that in all of this, you realized who really was genuinely there for you and who wasn't. And I'm going to say something in conclusion, which has come to my mind, but how have you dealt with some of that? Because a lot came to light after this experience.
Oh my God! In the Take Your Power Back show, one of the storytelling segments I talk about all the people that supported me, and what's interesting is that people will step up and help you if you're in need. Generally speaking, the ones you can count on do, but you'd also be surprised by those that don't. And you can't really focus on the ones that don't, because sometimes, to be honest, people don't know what to say. So this terrible thing happened to me. I'm not going to call her. I don't know what to say to her, right? So if you're ever in that circumstance where something terrible has happened to a friend or someone you know, call them and just say, look, I don't know what to say. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. I've also had some really traumatic things with family where I've been really disappointed and quite honestly hurt. And at the same time, a really beautiful thing that happened was Rob's first wife. During the time I was in the hospital, she had stage 4 breast cancer. She was going through chemotherapy, radiation, and she was at home. She couldn't drive anymore. She couldn't work anymore. And 3 occasions she made me homemade soup for Rob to bring to me at the hospital. And that just it touched me so much. I have her picture in my living room now, and she's wearing a Be Positive shirt, because what love and support you get from unexpected places. You'd be surprised.
I agree. With that, believe it or not, we have come to the final moments of our discussion, but there was one thing that I think I can conclude with, Kimberly, and then we'll take everybody's leave and let them enjoy their dinner. I did a lot of research for this session, and many of you that know me, when I do sessions, I can do it. If I know the topic, I'll flow with it. But in doing my research for this session, I found a lot of stats, found a lot of figures that I could use, but there was one thing that I decided to use for the conclusion. In an interview, Kimberly was asked, "How do you feel?" And she simply said, "I'm glad that this did not happen to somebody else." In life, a true measure of a person is not how much they pray or what jobs they hold or anything like that. It truly is how they treat other people. And the way Kimberly treats those around her has a message in it for all of us. Kimberly, on behalf of the entire community that's here today, thank you for your strength, your courage. Thank you.